from the plan.
May it please the court?
Yep.
At 11:22 p.m., a calm night for an air traffic controller is interrupted by a distressed call from a pilot. A pilot named Zeke Fortenberry, a pilot who needs to make an emergency landing, and who needs to make that emergency landing right now. Now together they find a runway with lights. Lights that are necessary because Zeke Fortenberry is flying in an unfamiliar area on an exceptionally dark, moonless night. Now, to turn these lights on, the pilot has to click his microphone a certain number of times. And these runway lights provide Zeke Fortenberry with one chance at landing safely. One chance at making it home safe to his wife, Madeline. But as Zeke Fortenberry is trying over and over again to turn these lights on, nothing is happening. And when those lights never come on, Zeke Fortenberry's one chance at landing safely, his one chance at making it home safe to his wife, is turned into nothing more than a shot in the dark. I'm Clair, and along with my co-counsel, Colin Spangler, we represent the plaintiff, Madeline Fortenberry. Now, Madeline Fortenberry would never have expected her entire life to change on a summer day. She never thought that the last conversation she had with her husband would be on August 18th, that all the future plans they had, all the dreams they had, would never happen. This tragedy all started on August 18th, when Zeke Fortenberry took a flight from Missouri to Dallas Lone Star. During that flight, Zeke realized that he was having engine failure, that he would have to make an emergency landing. And he contacted air traffic controller Alex Bell, and they found a private runway that Zeke could make it to, a runway with lights. Now these lights had a pilot-activated lighting system, which you'll hear a lot about today. But that system basically means that a pilot can turn on the lights by clicking their microphone on their plane a certain number of times. And the clicking is heard by a radio receiver on the ground, which then turns the lights on so the pilot is able to land safely. But unfortunately, on August 18th, the defendant, Thomas Thompson, the owner of this runway, knew one thing that Alex Bell, the air traffic controller, didn't know. That Zeke Fortenberry, our pilot needing to make an emergency landing, didn't know. And that was that these lights, this pilot-activated lighting system, was broken. That those lights would never turn on. And because these lights were broken, Zeke's one shot at landing safely was turned into nothing more than a shot in the dark. Members of the jury, today you must answer two questions. First, was Mr. Thompson negligent? And second, if he was negligent, what role did that negligence play in the death of Zeke Fortenberry? Now today, to help you answer those questions, we're going to bring you two witnesses. First, you'll hear from Alex Bell. Alex Bell is the air traffic controller who spoke with Mr. Fortenberry that night, who was with him during his last moments. Now, Ms. Bell will tell you that it was an exceptionally dark night, and that they found this runway on South Fork Ranch, Mr. Thompson's ranch, where Mr. Fortenberry had one shot at landing. And Ms. Bell will tell you why Zeke Fortenberry needed those lights. And Ms. Bell will tell you that Zeke tried over and over again to turn those lights on, but they never came on. We will also bring you Sam Williams. Now, Sam Williams is a mechanical engineer with experience in accident reconstruction, and she will be able to tell you more about this PAL system. She'll tell you that she went to look at this system, that she saw what didn't work, and she'll tell you that Mr. Thompson, the defendant, had ample time to get that system fixed. She will tell you that Mr. Thompson had to get that system fixed because Mr. Thompson accepted federal funding to build this light system. And that when he accepted federal funding, he agreed to some rules. Some rules that say when those lights break, you have to fix them within a reasonable amount of time. Now, we anticipate that the defense will call Thomas Thompson the defendant. And we anticipate that he'll tell you he did do something. That he sent one email to his ranch manager that he agreed to. And his answer, we expect, will be that he did do something. Finally, the defense will ask Kim Bates to come to the stand. Now, Miss Bates knows a lot about airplanes, but you will hear that she doesn't know very much about PAL systems, that she never went to Mr. Thompson's runway, that she never looked at his PAL system, and that she won't really be able to tell you anything about it. Members of the jury, I want you to keep three things in mind today when you're trying to answer these questions of Mr. Thompson's negligence and the role that it played. I want you to remember how Mr. Thompson failed to shoulder the responsibilities, how Mr. Thompson failed to obtain the repairs, and how Mr. Thompson failed to spread the word when those lights weren't working. Now let's go through that a little bit. So, when Mr. Thompson accepted this federal grant, you will learn that it came with rules, and we'll talk through these rules. But when he agreed to these rules, he accepted responsibility. Responsibility to maintain those lights. Responsibility to keep them working. But you will hear today that Mr. Thompson failed to shoulder that responsibility when the time came. Second, you will hear that Mr. Thompson failed to order those repairs. He'll tell you that he sent an email, but you will learn that he didn't try to go fix it himself. He didn't call anyone to come fix it. All he did was send one email, and by doing that, he failed to obtain the repairs that needed to be made to that light system. And finally, you will hear it that when Mr. Thompson learned that those lights did not work on August 10th of 2013, he didn't call Zeke Fortenberry, he didn't call Air Traffic Control, he didn't call the FAA, he did not tell anyone except for his own employee that those lights did not work, that pilots needing to activate those lights in emergency situations would not be able to use them. Now, today's case is a civil case, which means we must prove to you that Mr. Thompson was negligent by preponderance of the evidence. So to understand preponderance, let's think about a scale. Now today, before anyone said anything, that scale was perfectly even. But as evidence is brought before you, as you hear testimony, that scale will begin to tip under the weight of the evidence. And at the end of today's case, you must decide who the evidence is in favor of, where the weight of the evidence lies, who that scale is tipped for. And we are confident that when you learn about Mr. Thompson's failure to shoulder the responsibility, his failure to order the repairs, and his failure to spread the word, and that those failures left Mr. Fortenberry with a shot in the dark, we are confident that you will find Mr. Thompson liable. Thank you.
All right, the Pitts?
Yes, may I please court, Your Honor?
Yep.
His fate was sealed. When Zeke Fortenberry sealed that gas cap in Kansas City, he sealed his own fate. Members of the jury, throughout today's proceedings, you're going to hear a lot about airplanes, PAL systems, and the FAA. And you'll learn a lot about those things. But the most important thing you'll learn is that fueling an airplane is nothing like fueling a car. Zeke Fortenberry couldn't just fill up the plane and go. He had to make a precise calculation. He had to calculate exactly how much fuel he needed to get from point A to point B, plus have enough fuel to fly around for 45 minutes at his destination. The FAA required that. And through evidence and testimony, you'll see that Zeke Fortenberry didn't make the proper calculation. That his plane ran out of fuel, causing it to lose all power, and causing that crash. Today, we expect you'll find that there was nothing the defendant there's one thing that brings all of us to this courtroom today, and unfortunately, that is the death of Zeke Fortenberry. When that plane crashed, Zeke's life ended. And it goes without saying that this death was tragic and untimely, that we all have the deepest sympathies for the Fortenberry family. But today, our justice system requires that each and every one of you put aside those emotions, those feelings, as natural as they may be, and focus on the facts and the law. And when you do that, members of the jury, we expect you'll find that Thomas Thompson is not liable for the death of Zeke Fortenberry. Now, like I said earlier, you're going to hear a lot about these PAL systems and the FAA, but what is a PAL system and why do we care about the FAA? Well, I believe plaintiff touched on this earlier, that a PAL system it's a sophisticated piece of technology, but it is fairly simple to use. Any pilot in any plane flying over an airstrip that has one of these lighting systems just has to click their microphone to turn the lights on below them. Simple as that. But then the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, why do we care about them? Well, we care because they're going to come up a lot in today's proceedings. Because the FAA is a government agency that sets out rules and regulations, not just for pilots in airports, but also for private airstrips like the one owned by Mr. Thompson. And those rules sort of set out responsibilities, which the plaintiffs also touched on. But you know what, members of the jury? We're not going to deny those responsibilities today. We won't try to hide them or gloss over them. No, we'll call Mr. Thompson himself to the stand, and he'll tell you about those responsibilities. And we'll even show you the circular where the FAA published those rules about maintaining the airstrip and taking reasonable steps to fix the PAL system whenever Mr. Thompson learned that it was not working. We'll show those to you today. And to take it one step further, we won't deny that PAL system was broken on August 18th, 2013. We won't. Because at the end of the day, when you've seen all the facts, all the testimony and evidence, you'll see that all Mr. Thompson had to do was act reasonably. And the evidence will show you he did just that. Members of the jury, you'll see that email the plaintiffs talked about. You'll see it. And Mr. Thompson will tell you how on August 10th, 2013, a friend tried to land their airplane on his property. They clicked their microphone and the PAL system didn't come on. Someone had to go down there and turn the lights on by hand. But you'll also hear how Mr. Thompson sent that email, when he sent it, who he sent it to. You'll learn that his property manager, Mr. Barrett, well, he is Mr. Thompson's right-hand man, his go-to guy. The guy he goes to get things fixed and get things done on that South Fork ranch. And you'll learn that that email, it wasn't sent the next afternoon, the next evening. No, Mr. Thompson sent the email that very night to his property manager to get those lights fixed. We believe you'll find that was a reasonable action. And the plaintiffs might say, they might say today that that was not reasonable, that the email was ineffective, and that the lights not working even 8 days later was unreasonable. We expect them to say that. But we'll show you evidence and testimony to prove otherwise. You'll hear from Kim Bates, and even, we believe, one of their witnesses, Sam Williams, two professionals in aviation and accident reconstruction. You'll hear from them today, and they'll tell you how that PAL system is a sophisticated piece of technology. Yes, it's easy to use, but it's a machine. It's complicated. Not every person on the street knows how to fix this. You'll hear about the rural location of South Fork Ranch, and we believe, based on the evidence and testimony, you'll find that getting that PAL system fixed wasn't just some simple task. You'll find that even 8 days later, it not being fixed was reasonable. And now that we've reviewed some of the testimony and evidence, you'll see to show Mr. Thompson acted in accordance with that FAA, acted reasonably, and is not liable for what happened that night. It's important that we we'll get down to business. Talk about why we're really here. See, members of the jury, the FAA set out rules for Mr. Thompson in August of 2013. note the distance you're traveling. You need to note the size of the plane and its fuel capacity. How much fuel can it even hold? You also have to take into account the weather, the wind speed. Is it a headwind or a tailwind? And you have to look for your whole trip. But we expect the evidence to show you Mr. Fortenberry, even though he was an experienced pilot, he failed to do that. We expect you'll find that he only looked at one weather report when making that calculation. And that was the weather for his destination. That was the weather for the ground level, not even taking into consideration headwinds and tailwinds when he was traveling over 100 miles. We expect you'll find that Mr. Fortenberry, he didn't take into consideration that fuel capacity. And you'll find that that Piper Cygnet, the type of plane he was flying, it physically could not hold enough fuel to get him from point A to point B and fly around for 45 minutes without making an additional stop. He couldn't get there. Members of the jury, we expect you'll find that he miscalculated. And because of that miscalculation, his plane ran out of fuel 10 miles outside of South Fork Ranch, property of Mr. Thompson. And when that plane ran out of fuel and lost power, he had to make an emergency landing. But we also expect you'll find that there was nothing Mr. Thompson did or didn't do that would change that. These members of the jury, when Zeke Fortenberry sealed that gas cap in Kansas City, he sealed his own fate. Which is why Ms. Plaska at the end of today's proceedings will come before you and ask that you find Thomas Thompson not